Thank you very much. We are in one of the most dangerous moments of modern history. Donald Trump is, in my opinion, a completely unstable person who could take the world to disaster. His partner, Netanyahu, in Israel is similarly unstable and reckless. They are gambling the future of the world. They need to be stopped by world leaders such as Prime Minister Modi and President Xi and President Putin explaining to Mr. Trump that you cannot gamble the future of the world on your reckless threats. This is not a spectator sport for us. This is not for us to just sit back and ask, what will Donald Trump do? He has no right to threaten all of humanity with this absolutely reckless escalation. And as the Iranians have said, since they are under existential threat from the United States and Israel, they will fight back. They will destroy a tremendous amount of the physical infrastructure of the Gulf region, which is home to 1/3 of the world's oil supplies. They will destroy a lot of Israel. We could see escalation to full world war. This needs to be stopped. This is not asking, what is Donald Trump going to do? He is an absolutely unstable person. He is an ignorant person, I'm sorry to say. He does not have a strategy. He improvises, but he's improvising with the risk of the whole world at this point.
So then there's only an escalation ahead, Professor Sachs. You know, if time runs out, it's 5:14 a.m. India time tomorrow morning when this deadline that President Trump has put down, when it runs out. If that runs out and Iran has, communicated that it is absolutely no mood to listen to any kind of ultimatum, do we just see an escalation, power plants being bombed in that case?
Unless there is effective intervention by the outside powers. I have been urging that the BRICS countries be very clear. The BRICS represents half of humanity. It represents half of the world economy. It's very powerful. It needs to speak with a clear voice right now, not punitively against Iran, which is under attack, but directly to the two aggressors, which are Israel and the United States. Let's be honest, which is very hard in public discussion these days, but let's be honest. This is a war of choice for domination over the Middle East by Israel and the United States. Nobody could want this. Nobody can believe that this is prudent, safe, legal, responsible. No one can believe that this is going to turn out well. It needs to be stopped. Unfortunately, the two protagonists of this war of aggression, Netanyahu and Trump, are not themselves stable individuals. They need help to back off and go home. And that help has to come from stable world leaders that have a lot of humanity in their responsibility to say you cannot gamble with the world this way.
I want to just play out for you, Professor Sachs, because, much of what is being said, much of what is being discussed right now, are conveyed directly by the American president, either on his Truth Social account or in a series of interactions, press gaggles, things like that. Here's what he said about the Strait of Hormuz, the latest of what Trump has said. Let me just play out that for our viewers.
It's a simple military maneuver. It's relatively safe, but you need a lot of help in the sense of you need ships, you need volume. And NATO could help us, but they so far haven't had the courage to do so. And others could help us, but, we don't use it. At a certain point, it'll open itself at a certain point. But we've defeated the enemy, and they are an enemy. They're a sick group of people. The leadership is gone, the Navy is gone, the Air Force is gone, the anti-aircraft equipment that they have, the radar they have is all gone. Everything's gone. The strait itself, the actual strait, how are you? The strait itself is, we're doing a good job. But it would be nice if the countries, including China, if the countries that use it, China uses it 90% of their energy. Japan is 95% of the energy. It would be nice if those countries would get involved.
Professor Sachs, you just heard that, beg your pardon, everything that President Trump says, there's always a lot to unpack. He starts by saying, others should help because clearly we need help. And then goes on to literally say we don't need any help because, we've bombed the hell out of them. They don't have an air force. They don't have a navy anymore. What do you make of this contradiction? And a lot of the American press has made light of the fact that everything that Trump says is packed with contradictions precisely about what his intentions are and what he needs to end the war.
We're watching a disordered mind. He's an old man. He's a confused man. He cannot even utter a single sentence that isn't filled with internal contradictions. We should not take this as our fate. We should try to head off the consequences of these delusions. This is a man who understands very, very little, yet he sits upon a tremendously powerful military machine. He is commanding that machine right now. He has no strategy. There is no long-term understanding. There's not even, as we have just heard, the understanding within one sentence. Either it's easy or not easy to open the Strait of Hormuz. If it's easy, why is he begging the world to do this? Well, the answer is it's not easy. It's not even going to happen. And the same time that he's saying the war's nearly at an end, thousands of Marines are being deployed to the area for ground operations. He's not only a person of complete confusion and delusion, but he's a liar from beginning to end. So even as he speaks, the contrary is actually happening. He's the man who says we negotiate and then bombs the negotiators. This is done repeatedly. He's the man who praised the secrecy of a secret attack, even telling the Japanese Prime Minister, oh, you're so good, you did it at Pearl Harbor. We've never had a person of such mental instability before, and we don't know how to handle it. Most world leaders say, well, I'm not going to get involved in that. We have to watch what's he going to do. Our newspapers are filled with headlines that say, what will Trump do? This is the wrong approach. The right approach is, what does the world need right now? The world needs to avoid an escalation that could be devastating for the entire world. Then, given that's the world need, how can this be done? Well, Trump listens to his peers, to Prime Minister Modi, to President Putin, to President Xi, to President Lula. He listens to his peers. He doesn't listen to anybody in Congress. He doesn't listen to public opinion, but he listens to his peers. He does not want to be told, you're on the wrong track. He doesn't want to fail in the sight of his peers. They need to help him get out of this mess before it becomes a complete global disaster, not afterwards. This is the time when he needs advice from the BRICS countries, honest advice, not games, not, oh, well, we're with you, Mr. President, but clarity that what has started a few weeks ago is a calamity for the world, and it needs to stop. That Israel perhaps talked Trump into a calamity, and that the U.S. is absolutely not only going to cause global disaster, but it's going to pay a terrible price for all of this. That's what needs to be said. We have very little truth in public discussion right now because almost all world leaders are afraid to contradict Mr. Trump, which to my mind is the wrong approach when you have someone so powerful and yet so deluded. We need actually solutions right now by world leaders to say clearly, explicitly, calmly, this must stop now before it destroys the world. And it can do so. It can do so economically by blowing up the oil and the gas fields of the Middle East. That is quite close to happening. And it can be even worse by leading to an escalation that eventually turns nuclear.
Yeah.
And you even have Israel, for example, which is a completely reckless country, totally reckless, bombing nuclear power plants. This is not only against international law for obvious reasons, this is grotesquely dangerous for the whole world to bomb nuclear power plants. So we need some grown-ups urgently.
Yeah, I just don't, I wonder if any of those persons you call grown-ups is willing to actually pick up the phone and enter this entire mess at this point of time. Most countries are simply using all their resources and energies to secure their own interests at this point of time. And I very much include India in that list. But Professor Sachs, I'm glad you mentioned the Pearl Harbor comment from Trump, because that, according to some estimates, has been the most shared, most viral, most engaged comment from Trump. And, that tells you a little bit about the conversation, really. So I did want to play that out for a moment, and then I'm going to get you to comment on it a little bit more, because there are so many layers to what he said. And I think most people are still in a state of shock, even given everything that one expects from Donald Trump. Let's just play that out for us.
I don't want to signal too much. When we go in, we went in very hard. And we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay, why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay, right? He's asking me. Now you believe in surprise, I think much more so than us. And we had to surprise him, and we did. And because of that surprise, we knocked out, the first 2 days, we probably knocked out 50% of what and much more than we anticipated doing. So if I go and tell everybody about it, there's no longer a surprise.
Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Asks the president to Japanese journalists there, Professor Sachs.
In America, up until Mr. Trump, Pearl Harbor was called a day that will live in infamy. The famous words of Franklin Roosevelt, because it was a surprise attack that was carried out while the US and Japan were actually negotiating. And it was regarded throughout modern American history as an evil act, as a unworthy act of a nation, a surprise attack that killed many people and launched a disastrous war that ended up killing millions of people. And Donald Trump, because he's an ignorant, unstable man, views this as a positive. This is the first time in American history since December 7th, 1941, that any American politician has ever spoken like this. This shows the dire risks that we are in, because this kind of mental instability is real, and it is driving a very powerful military machine right now. And you said correctly that few world leaders want to get involved. They're viewing this as a spectator sport. What will happen? We cannot view this as a spectator sport. This is our lives at stake. This is the world at stake. We have to ask, how can peace come before further escalation destroys the world economy and escalates to perhaps a point of no return?
Professor, Donald Trump lashing out at NATO, saying, why aren't you guys getting involved? We've basically been the power behind NATO. We've done all the heavy lifting. He's kind of insulted his way into getting some of those countries to finally say, okay, we'll send some of our ships to help out. I want to play out a key moment in that entire narrative, where Trump has basically bashed NATO and in the same breath, ironically said, we don't really need you anymore. Oh, now you're going to be sending ships, but then we've already done the work, so why are you sending ships now? But we also need help. It's an insane loop of contradictions. Just look at this little soundbite.
We don't need anybody. We're the strongest nation in the world. We have the strongest military by far in the world. We don't need them.
We're the strongest military in the world. We don't need them. But we also do need them, Professor Sachs, is what the president says.
Please, India, take note. Please, do not get trapped by the United States. India has been led into playing a game, a U.S. game. It's called the Quad, the U.S.-led Quad of countries with India, Japan, and Australia, quote, against China. This is not befitting India, and it is very dangerous. And the reason I mention it in this context is that the United States is a trap right now. You heard from Donald Trump what he thinks about the rest of the world. He thinks that about India. He thinks that about every place in the world. Do not get closer without getting burned. This is my very strong suggestion. Countries that are aligned with the United States are getting burned. It's the adage that I quote very frequently of Henry Kissinger, that to be an enemy of the United States is dangerous, but to be a friend is fatal. And Kissinger knew what he was talking about. So India, as a great power, should stay clear of these traps, and it should work together with other great powers, China and Russia in particular, and Brazil, and the African leadership, to say we are not going to let the world slip out of our hands because Donald Trump has some delusion, or Benjamin Netanyahu has some delusion. This unbridled, rapidly escalating war of aggression by Israel and the United States needs to end now, before the world economy is destroyed and before thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, God knows how many people are killed in this mayhem.
I have another comment from the president, Professor Sachs, that I want you and our viewers to hear, which is specifically about a ceasefire. This is also a fascinating moment because in it you will hear the president talk about how there's a ceasefire on the table, but that he doesn't need to sign a ceasefire, but that Iran wants a ceasefire, but that there's no one in Iran to talk to. So where does this ceasefire actually come on? It's another incredible example of saying a lot without saying very much at all. Just listen to this.
Well, look, we can have dialogue, but I don't want to do a ceasefire. You don't do a ceasefire when you're literally obliterating the other side. They don't have a Navy. They don't have an Air Force. They don't have any equipment. They don't have any spotters. They don't have anti-aircraft. They don't have radar. And their leaders have all been killed at every level. We're not looking to do that.
Professor Sachs, about the ceasefire, for the last 4 days, that's been a word that the President of the United States has been using. But again, he keeps jumping between the specifics of it. So people are confused. Is there a ceasefire on the table? Is there someone to speak to? Are the Iranians not speaking? Do they not want a ceasefire? No clarity.
The Iranians are clear. They're not accepting a ceasefire because the United States will bomb them again. Israel will bomb them again at any moment, at any time, because unfortunately the word of the United States and Israel means nothing right now. Twice the U.S. and Israel have bombed Iran, this time at devastating rates, after engaging or in the midst of engaging in negotiations that were making significant progress. So Trump does not utter a sentence that isn't an internal contradiction. But please, and this is the most important point, this is not tactical, this is not clever, this is not to confuse the other side. This is confusion itself. And it's flailing around. And we need to end this not by Donald Trump figuring out things, but by being helped to understand the truth. And the truth is that this is leading the world to disaster, and the United States has no right to lead the world to disaster. So honestly, world leaders, if they sit back, they're doing a profound disservice to the world and to their own people. And if they side with the United States because it's so powerful, they're doing an even greater disservice, because the U.S. and Israel are wrecking the entire world, bringing the world to the most dangerous moment of modern history. And this needs to stop. And they will not stop internally, neither Israel nor the United States. The internal brakes don't exist, only the external brakes, and those need to be applied.
Professor Sachs, one of the most talked about Truth Social posts from the president came last week when he was seen to have thrown Israel under the bus after, Israel's attack on the South Pars gas field of Iran. And, we all saw that escalation and that crossfire. He basically said, I had no idea that Netanyahu was going to do this attack. What did you think of that? We've got that statement up on our screen right now, where he basically said the US had no idea. Israel lashed violently out because of what's happening in the Middle East, which is a very nebulous, ambiguous kind of thing to say. But he basically said, we had no idea, and most people are calling him out on that. What did you think?
Of course, Israel and the U.S. In the intelligence agencies, CIA and Mossad, and in the military are tightly intertwined. Of course, the United States knew, both in the intelligence agencies and in the military. Whether the President of the United States knew or didn't understand or heard or didn't, or is lying as usual, I don't know. It doesn't matter. This is a joint U.S.-Israeli operation, connected at every operational level. Trump himself is a very ignorant man with an extraordinarily short attention span. This is very, very dangerous. He can't even, as we've been saying, utter a sentence that is consistent from the beginning to the end. So maybe he didn't know, but probably he did and forgot, or he did and lies, I don't know. But maybe he didn't, but his government, his military, his intelligence agencies obviously knew. So he says anything. We can spend all the time listening to this stream of consciousness nonsense, because it is nonsense, beginning to end. None of it makes sense at the length even of one sentence. But we should not sit back and let the world get wrecked by this kind of delusional, impulsive, inconsistent activity.
One of the escalatory steps, Professor Sachs, going forward, is the possibility of boots on the ground, or maybe some kind of an operation that involves the U.S. Marines taking over the Karg Island, or possibly any other strategic location inside or outside Iran. Given the kind of escalatory trap that many analysts are looking at, and everything that you say and know about Trump already, do you think that's a distinct possibility that Trump will escalate using Marines? There are 2 amphibious ships already, as you know, headed to the Persian Gulf. Do you think that's a distinct possibility, or is it just muscle flexing?
Oh, of course it's a possibility. There are no limits, and there is no strategy. So, of course, it's a possibility. If the Marines are heading that way, they're going to be used, unless, as I keep saying, the war is stopped by other means, basically from the outside, explaining to Mr. Trump that it's over, it's time to go home. If that doesn't happen, if the war continues on the trajectory that it is, of course, Marines will be used, many will die, there will be further escalation. This is in part Netanyahu's dream. He wants this to spiral upward until the United States is fully engaged and launches a full, total war against Iran, maybe nuclear war, who knows? This is Netanyahu's dream. And so it's all going according to Israel's plans, and Trump is, of course, going along with it. I'm not saying Israel alone caused it. This is Trump's delusion every bit as much as Netanyahu's delusion. But of course, there's no natural stopping point from an internal break in the United States. That won't happen. And there's no winning the U.S. goals in any easy way. Quite the contrary. These goals that were stated by the U.S. and Israel are not in reach. Regime change is not going to happen, not in the way they thought. And it's not going to happen before there is mass destruction of the Middle East and perhaps of the world.
And speaking of mass destruction, Professor Sachs, the tit-for-tat strikes on nuclear sites in Dimona in Israel, in Isfahan in Iran, how do you see that? That is a distinct, escalation in the choice of targets being hit now. Yes, it is true that Isfahan was hit last year as well, but this year, given what we've seen so far, that appears to suggest exactly what you're saying, that there are no limits.
I believe there are no limits. I believe we're dealing with the 2 mentally unstable leaders that have no limits and are prepared to escalate all the way to nuclear war. It's shocking to say it, but I don't see the limits of these 2 people. They don't have internal limits. Israeli society at this point is so propagandized and so profoundly destabilized mentally that it's basically a full country at war. The United States is different. The American public is against this war. Of course, it's being fed the usual vast amount of propaganda by the hour, but it's basically against this war, unlike the Israeli public, which is overwhelmingly for this war. But Trump himself does not have institutional limits internally. Our Congress basically doesn't exist, even though it is their constitutional responsibility and sole responsibility, or only Congress has the responsibility to declare war, but Trump has completely arrogated that responsibility to himself at a personal level. So there are no institutional checks right now inside the U.S., and anything can happen. And bombing nuclear power plants, unfortunately, this is par for the course of recklessness of Israel and the United States right now. And it should be a signal, again, to Prime Minister Modi, to President Putin, to President Xi, and to others, that this has gone far enough for them to step up together, to intervene, and to explain that this must stop.
One final soundbite from the President of the United States, Professor Sachs, that I want your views on. And this is about talking to Iran. You know, we've repeatedly tried to see if there is any conversation at all happening. And whenever the President has been asked about it, he says the US wants talks with Iran, but there's nobody to talk to after the killing of senior officials. And at the same time, we've heard Iran saying, we don't want to talk. Unless this stops, we don't want to talk. So there clearly are people to talk to, but Trump says we don't want to talk to them because there's nobody to talk to. What did you think of that? But first, let me play out that soundbite.
Their Navy's gone, their Air Force is gone, their anti-aircraft is all gone, it's all gone, their radar is all gone, their leaders are all gone, the next set of leaders are all gone, and the next set of leaders are mostly gone, and now nobody wants to be a leader over there anymore. We're having a hard time. We want to talk to them, and there's nobody to talk to. We have nobody to talk to.
Well, Iran's very much talking, Professor Sachs. I mean, we see something coming out of there and their leadership almost every day. Trump says, you know, there's nobody to talk to. We want to talk to Iran, but there's nobody to talk to.
Honestly, what should we make of a statement like that? You and I know that Iran has leaders, that it has a functioning government despite the mass assassinations by Israel and the United States. I don't want to list all the names of senior officials, but we could quite easily. So when Trump says this, it's not even kind of a clever spin, it's a madness. A president of the United States speaking such vile, empty, vulgar lies as a matter of course should wake up the world leaders. Really, this is what I keep saying. This is not normal. This is not hard for you and for me to look at that and say, that's not true. This isn't even clever. This is delusional. And it's delusional as well as psychopathic, because it's also this strange idea. There are no leaders because we killed them all. So we killed everybody, so there's no one to talk to. It's both a delusion and it's a kind of psychopathic statement as well. We need better. Honestly, we need better. There are some ways to try to get better right now. It's what I call grown-up behavior. We need grown-ups right now to take some responsibility for the world.
Professor Jeffrey Sachs,